Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for tuning into AADL TV for another episode of Biblio Files, a little show on AADL TV brought to you by the Ann Arbor District Library. My name is Amanda, and with me is Lucy and Christopher. And each week we take a few minutes to talk all about one topic involving books. And this week we are discussing a long book. And we know some of you out there have also read long books that you love, long books that you want to read and haven't gotten to. That's what we're talking about today. Lucy, what long book did you bring to the table today?
So the book that I chose for today was written in 2003, and it's called Shantaram, and it clocks in at 933 pages, so it is long. And it is by a man named Gregory David Roberts, and it is the story of a character named Lynn, who is an escaped convict from an Australian prison. He was in there for robbing a bank. He was a heroin addict, and he has this fake passport. He escapes, he flees maximum security prison. So that's part of the initial part of the story. And then he disappears into the back streets of Mumbai, where he becomes associated with the underworld in Mumbai, like gangsters and drug dealers, extortionists. But there's also some minor Bollywood characters that he runs into. There's these just sort of families that are living in this world. So the characters, there's all these really interesting characters, and it's about his sort of wild ride of being this escaped convict and staying hidden, but also starting to get really involved in this new world that he's living in. The descriptions of the city and all the surroundings are amazing. It's sort of this exploration. He divides it into 5 different parts. So it's got parts, like one part addresses love, one addresses happiness, one addresses friendship. But the main point is that ultimately your life is about how you decide to start over, what you do with what you're given. And the author claims that this is a true story. And he did escape from an Australian prison, this author. He did have a false passport under the name, I think the last name on the passport was Lindsay. So that was kind of contested, but it does make the book definitely interesting. And there was a second book written. I didn't read that one, and there was rumors of a third, but he's still, he's sort of a not really like well viewed, like he's got this strange story going on. So who knows? But anyway, it was really fun to read this book, and it was so riveting. I couldn't put it down. All 933 pages of it were just like really engaging. So that is Shantaram by Gregory David Roberts. Christopher, what did you pick for a long book?
Well, this isn't quite as long, but it's a 600+ page book, The Once and Future King by T.H. White. And I read this one difficult summer, and I remember finishing the last page being so upset that I had to leave this world. It was wonderful. It's such a varied book. In fact, it really is 4 separate books that were published at different times and then collected into this one volume. The first volume came out in 1938, which is the year after The Hobbit was published. So there must have really been something going on in England during that era that really created so many masterpieces. Some people are under the idea that this is an epic fantasy. It really has very little to do with what we consider to be fantasy today. And in fact, it's all about these central characters in the Arthurian legends. But it's really just, it becomes this sad and tragic love triangle, of course, between Arthur, Lancelot, and Guinevere. And it's about looking back on life, what your legacy will be, and friendship, and so much more. The first book is kind of whimsical and fantastic and funny, and the stories get less and less funny as you go, but they're no less engaging. So I love this book, and this book also has many other fans who swear by it as well. It's probably not for everyone. There are lots of anachronistic references in the book. It really goes against this fantasy genre, and as I said, it's really not fantasy at all. But it is well worth every page. I loved it. Um, and that's it for the Once and Future King, T.H. White. Amanda?
Well, thanks, Christopher. So in talking about long books, I had a hard time choosing a book to discuss. I don't gravitate towards reading long books. I had the same reason for short stories. I like books that are under 400 pages. 300 is great. Like 285 is ideal. If it's a good writer, you can get a great story in less than 300 pages. Some books are super long just to be super long, and you get bogged down. And I didn't want to discuss the author of the book I'm going to mention today, but I felt it was important for me to do so on purpose. So the book I'm talking about, of course, is It by Stephen King. This is one of his longer books. It clocks in at over 1,000 pages. It seems like whatever version you grab, it's just over 1,000 pages. And I did want to mention this one, or him in general, this author, because a lot of his books are longer. He has a lot of long, giant books. And the thing about Stephen King writing is he's very verbose, he's very descriptive, it's very wordy, and sometimes you really do get bogged down in these details. And some people who read him really like that, and even me who does, you still get bogged down a little bit in the story. Like there'll be a 600-page novel and you're on page 250 and you're like, okay, when's this stuff going to happen? And you know every single detail about every character, but you haven't gotten to the meat of the story yet. But it doesn't, you get used to it, and you realize that's what you're up for when you're reading certain Stephen King novels. So back to It. It came out in 1986. I read the book when I was 14. It was summer. I decided it was a great thing to read on the back deck, laying by the pool, and I just scarfed it up. I was reading a more horror, like teen horror novels at that point, and I think the miniseries was coming out on television around the same time, and a friend and I decided we were going to read it. So this is also one of the most talked about books by Stephen King. Not a lot of people who've read it. People who read it or have read it seem to have liked his writing. It's not, if you want to grab one Stephen King book, this is not the one you're going to grab. But people, I feel like, know about the story, or they know the face of the clown. So the story is set in the 50s. It's also set in the 80s. And basically you've got this shape-shifting monster that most people, or that's most seen as Pennywise the Dancing Clown, but it's actually a shape-shifting monster, and it feeds on the fear. And every 27 years, this shape-shifting monster reappears to feed off fear, mostly children, and mostly they become killed in the manner of him living off their fear. So every 27 years in the town of Derry, this monster appears and children go missing. There are strange accidents that happen. It's been going on for centuries. And here we have, it's in the 50s, it's summer, and I think it's summer, maybe it's spring. And there's a young boy who's he's around 12 or 13, and his younger brother goes missing. He's one of the many kids that go missing, and he wants to figure out what happened to his brother and all these other kids that are missing. And this kid he's not popular. He doesn't have a lot of friends. He gets picked on by these bullies. And so he and a few of these other kids kind of end up in this little group together. There are 6 of them. They call themselves the Losers. They become the Losers Club. And the character Bill wants to avenge his brother's death. And so these 6 characters, they go to find the monster, and all kinds of things happen, and they do it. They solve it. And they said, hey, if this doesn't work, we got to come back. If it comes back, we'll come back too. And sure enough, it comes back, and they are now adults. So the story is told from the point of view of these 12 and 13-year-old children who are battling the demons in their life, as well as this fierce monster. And then also as adults, where they are in their adulthood and things they're battling, as well as the character. The book is wild. It's very detailed. There are some things in here I'm like, what is even happening? It has been made for television. There's a 1990 TV miniseries that happened, and then more recently, in the past few years, there's been It Part 1, It Part 2, which are like theatrical releases. So even if you don't want to read the book, I do recommend one of the movies. Anyway, so when people think about it, they think about the clown, and people are afraid of clowns all over. I was reading one quote getting ready for this episode where Stephen King says something like, "No one likes a clown at midnight." And I just thought, like, I don't have an aversion to clowns. It's not one of the things I'm afraid of. So if I were to face this supernatural shape-shifting monster, like, it wouldn't appear to be a clown to me. It would be something that I was actually afraid of. Anyways, I really enjoyed this book. I would like to, I've only read it once. And again, I was 14 and that was a long time ago. I do actually want to listen to the audiobook of it. And the audiobook clocks in at 45 hours. And the longest audiobook I've listened to is 26 hours. And that was the final book in the Harry Potter series. So we'll see what happens when it's time for me to listen to it. But anyways, that's my book recommendation for this week. It was a very long bit of information about a very long book. Christopher and Lucy, do you have any final thoughts about long books or anything we've talked about?
Well, one thing about it, it's funny because you're saying like people remember the clown, and I would think I read it when I was like 16, and I would like to reread it or listen to it. But I really remember the story of the losers, like, and their friendship, and that's the part that like really sticks with me. So yeah, it's just interesting. There's so much in that book. I mean, I just remember being like, this is an amazing book. It's also very scary, but you know, yeah. So
it's a scary book. And I love the genre of kids having adventures. And so that's what kept me reading. I'm glad you brought that up, Lucy, because that's definitely one thing that kept me reading. I don't have an aversion to like horror and scary things happening in books or films. But for me, it was the kids. Even in watching the screen adaptations, it's the kids' story, and how, and the thing is, they're individually, they can't battle this entity, but together they can. Anyways, I could talk longer, but I won't. So that is us discussing long books for this week. We will be back again with another exciting episode with some sort of book topic. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Below this video, you'll see a little link. If you click that, it takes you to the library's website. We would love to hear about what long books that you love or hate or just want to talk about or recommend to us or fellow viewers. Please go ahead and do so. We hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time.